Okay, so so that's the role that Texas plays um, in the Mexican-American War, which lasts from 1846 to 1848. The other part of the war has to do with the fact that the U.S. President James K. Polk, who was elected in 1844, and I know this is the kind of thing that drives you nuts. James K. Polk, why do I have to learn about him? He's the most important president you've never heard of, or most of you have never heard of. Maybe some of you had excellent history teachers, or you like reading history on your own. But it's James K. Polk that captured over half of Mexico and brought it into the United States. It's pretty incredible. So we're talking about California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, parts of Wyoming, parts of Utah, became part of the United States during Polk's presidency. He basically, in the movie, makes this very clear. When Mexico refused to sell this land to the United States, Polk decided to provoke a war with Mexico. And that's something else Americans really don't want to think about, that the way we got California and even Oregon Territory is that the U.S. President James K. Polk provoked a war with Mexico, which the U.S. won. And then in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, and I'll talk about that in a second. So hang on, and I'll talk about that in a second, became part of the United States. So that's the story here, and that, like I say, that's the story of American imperialism to this, which is, people don't really like to think about how the U.S. got California. And what happened is that the U.S. was much stronger than Mexico. There was a fight generated over the location of the southern border of Texas. But part of this fight also was to defeat Mexico and to capture territory, like I say, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Utah. So Texas plays a role in a wider land grab by force by the U.S. President James K. Polk. So Polk, to his own way of thinking, very successful. He only serves one term. Very, very important president, and he's somebody that you do need to know because he had a profound impact on the United States. The United States would not stretch all the way to California had it not been for James K. Polk. And it's kind of very, very difficult to think about the U.S. So let me take you back to this map, and if you're not looking at, or this ad rather, if you're not looking at the image, I do want you to look at the absolute vodka map. What it shows is what North America would look like today had it not been for the annexation of Texas and the Mexican-American War and the capture of the territory that was Mexico in the Mexican-American War. And that's what made so many people, and that many, but people were quite loud. They were furious about this reminder, I guess, about how much of Mexico was lost to the United States in the 1840s. First, Texas, peacefully, Texas is annexed into the United States, but then the rest of the screen area was brought into the United States by force. And so there's a big controversy. Absolute Vodka, I think, I'm not in advertising, but they like to think of themselves as kind of an edgy company that makes these edgy kinds of ads. And this was very edgy, and it was also an ad that was aimed in Mexico, right, to Mexican patriotism, because you can be for damn sure that Mexico has not forgotten that the United States grabbed 55% of its territory in the 1840s. And it was kind of aimed at Mexican pride. But long story short, Absolute Vodka had to apologize for this ad. They had to pull the ad. and the brouhaha ended. So I just think it's kind of a very, very interesting story. Just a reminder of how hot history is. I know a lot of you think, who cares about history? Why do I have to take Texas history? Why do I take any history? Hey, history is everywhere. You can't escape history. You may not care about history, but history cares about you. You cannot escape history, people. I know you wish you could, but history shadows you every waking moment of your life. And you might as well understand some aspects of history if you're going to understand why we are the way we are today. So this is kind of an interesting instance of how you can't escape history. And it's a vodka ad to boot, so that's kind of interesting, right? Now, I told you I would talk about the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That was the treaty that was signed after the Mexican defeat. And that was the treaty that made formally the Rio Grande, the southern border of Texas, the southern border of the United States, at least from Texas to El Paso. It created basically the southern border of the United States. The U.S. purchased portions of Arizona in the 1850s, and that locked down the southern border of the United States, but that's Arizona history, not Texas history. The reason the U.S. purchased some of Arizona in the 1850s is the U.S. wanted to build a railroad, and that was the best area to build a railroad. Okay, that's a digression. You don't have to learn it for Texas history. But anyway, so 1848, in essence, creates the southern border of Texas and really the southern border of the United States. And so now finally, the Rio Grande, which white Texans, Anglo-Texans had declared for years was the southern border of the U.S. Now it becomes the actual southern border of the U.S. So one of the things I want to get across also in this course is borders are important. Borders indicate power relations. Who's got power, who doesn't, at what time do some folks have power, at what time do some folks don't have power, or nations. And if you think about what I talked about in this course, if you think about the Sabine River, that's all about Spain and France, and then Spain and the United States, right? The power relations there. And if you think about the Rio Grande, that's all about U.S. imperialism and the fact that the U.S. wanted to grab the Rio Grande as a river highway, and also provokes a war about whether or not the Nueces River or the Rio Grande River would be the southern border of Texas, because he's also got another agenda. He wants to capture Arizona and New Mexico, but above all, he wants to capture California, because of course, when you capture California, you suddenly have Pacific ports. And if you have Pacific ports, then that means that you can start trading with Asia, you can start trading with China, you can start trading with India, you can start trading with the Philippines. I mean, it's inconceivable to think that the U.S. wouldn't have Pacific ports today in 2020. Well, this is how we got these Pacific ports. So the Mexican-American War is hugely important. It's hugely important at the time. It's hugely important in the causation of the Civil War, which I'll talk about in another series of podcasts at another time. It creates Pacific ports. It establishes the southern border of Texas. And it's something that you should know about. And that's why I'm posting it for this week. Also, I think this documentary is extremely, extremely well done. It's very, very interesting. One last thing before I end this podcast. You don't have to go into the minutia of all the battles and all the maneuvers in the battles. That's the kind of thing that will drive you absolutely nuts. What I'll do in the box under the URL that I post for the documentary, I'll give you keywords and I'll let you know, like always, what I'm looking for.